All right, welcome everybody. Today is Thursday, June 25th, 2026. It is 6:31 p.m. and this is the general meeting of the board for Intermediate District 287, the last meeting of the 2025-2026 school year. So before we move on to our agenda, I'd like to ask Board Member Brian Roth to read the mission of the district and start our board member introductions.
Thank you. Mission of Intermediate 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative, specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students. And my name is Brian Roth from West Onka.
Rich Sack, Brooklyn Center.
Keith Tate, Osseo Area Schools.
Kim Ross, Eden Prairie.
Dan Genestra, Wayzata Public Schools.
And Casey, proudly representing St. Louis Park.
Shannon Andreessen, representing Hopkins Public Schools.
I'm Michael Birdman, I represent Edina Public Schools.
Leslie Locke, Orono Schools.
Mike Remicall, Minnetonka Schools.
Thank you. And Caroline Long from Robbinsdale was not able to be here with us tonight. Okay, next up, we approve our general meeting agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
By Shannon, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dan. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the agenda is approved. Do we have anyone here for audience opportunity to speak tonight? Thank you. Right. Next up, we have our consent agenda containing routine business items. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Moved by Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Keith. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the consent agenda is approved. Okay, next up is our instructional report, the last one by Dr. John Voss. He's going to provide an update on the Teaching and Learning Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members, Superintendent Dowd. This year, we launched our Teaching and Learning Advisory in accordance with state statute and board policy to involve community participation in our curriculum and instruction efforts. It's coming together after a lot of consideration for how this works in our environment and how we can move from where we are to where we expect to be. So we started because this is a new venture and many of our processes are undergoing revision, implementation, and determination. We figured we needed to begin with some initial steps to understand what it is we would be inviting our staff and community to participate in. There's a lot that's involved in this, and we wanted to make sure we moved carefully to explain. As we were meeting initially, it was apparent that there's a lot of things we do that aren't always shared or understood or taken the time to dig into much and deeply. And so we thought we'd start with reviewing the district's instructional and curriculum plans, some of which we've talked about here and some of which we've talked about in a lot of different places, but to begin to define that in a way that can be shared easily. And particularly emphasizing how we're implementing the Minnesota academic standards. And then the next part of that was to identify some yearly goals for instruction and curriculum improvement and share those with you all. And that's also part of our strategic plan. So tying these things together is a big part of that. And then make recommendations going forward for how we're going to evaluate the processes for measuring progress towards some of those goals. That was sort of the big parts, the big three things that we were going to begin to look at. So for membership in this initial planning, we started with a fairly small group so that we could figure out our priorities for how we're going to engage on some of these big topics. We had two local 2209 representatives. Nick Duchateau is the teacher that was involved, and Ku Her was our ESP. And then from the district departments and areas, myself, Melissa Broading from Special Ed, Laura McLuhan from Student Supports, Kiara Zachary from Equity and Inclusion, and then Brennan McDonald from Family Engagement. And we had a principal, Aslyn Dwyer from North, and two assistant principals, Scott Swanson from CTC and Jake Zern from West Education Center. And then recognizing that our long-term goal is to include more staff and ultimately more community members, caregivers, and students, we set out some plans for further involvement of these groups. So as we looked ahead to teachers and staff throughout how we're managing our professional development, we can provide opportunities to learn about some of the systems we have in place for accountability, some of which they're already aware of, but some of which we need to explain a little more deeply. And then for the caregivers and the community, we have a number of things that have been in place that I think have been presented here as well, in terms of presenting some of the background and decision points that we have at some of the events we hold at the sites, things like the conferences and the coffee and donuts and some of the leadership teams that are beginning to come together, and include some of those in those engagement events. And then as far as students are concerned, with our leadership team meetings, that's an opportunity to explain more about how the big systems work, and also to develop some more participatory action research that they can do with other students around some of these areas, particularly curriculum and the instructional framework that we're looking at next year will lend themselves really well to some of the student activity. The scope of the work, like I said, involves a lot with not just academic standards, but our achievement goals, some of the assessment information that we have, providing equitable access to the most effective and more diverse teachers, all of the elements of curriculum that are involved in the state and our own requirements for being rigorous and accurate and anti-racist and culturally sustaining. And then the environments that we create for learning for the students and the work environments for teachers, the budget implications, the program evaluations, all of those are pretty big items in and of themselves. And so how they tie together and how we start to move to involving more of our community and stakeholders and caregivers, I think those are all key factors that we're going to work towards over time. So then the first steps, as we move into that, we wanted to look at what we have in place in coordinating our strategic plan, starting with what we already do for the state level as we implement our MTSS systems, connecting with our strategic plan and our school improvement plans, but also that we have the curriculum review cycle that we've now solidified that we can begin to share and dig into more with the steps for each of those layers. We've completed a comprehensive needs assessment connected with our ESSA identification for improvement. So there's a lot of practices that we'll be putting into place around that and action plans with it. And then adopting universal instructional practices. Part of our strategic plan goal for achieving academic success is to implement those universal practices and see how they understand how they play out in all of our district programs. And this is the roadmap that we figure, and it will become a cycle as we get to each of these areas. But what we're recommending is this is how we approach each of these topics as we get into it, is that we establish a team. And while we've got a small one now for this first step, we do want to allow other groups to review and respond to some of this and become engaged in particular aspects of it as we go forward. And then we have begun to understand the systems and not just those of us who are in the smaller group, but again, how do we bring that to a widening circle of caregivers, staff members, students, and be able to explain it in ways that are meaningful for everybody. Because that's really where we identify our student needs and the progress that are being made, which then help us clarify those practices so that we can define the structures we want to focus on, lay out what some of those are. When we start showing dashboards of student data or achievement data, it can become overwhelming if you don't break it down and understand. So what are the practices that are based on that then? And then when we get into reviewing the data, we can define what it means to measure progress as we look at that and what, how do we boil down? When we've seen this in the strategic plan data that we've pulled out is that there's a lot of different measures, and how we make sense of how they fit together is where a lot of the thinking work really happens. Prioritizing by need is then how we can look at allocating resources. And then all of that comes together as we invite more participation and roll it out and then gather feedback from all these audiences. So rather than throw it all out there at first and try to find ways to plug people in, what we've looked at is a way we can begin doing this and make it a process that has several steps that we'll repeat with each big thing that we dig into. A lot of the connected work that I mentioned, but I think is going to go from here into the next phases. The goal setting and progress monitoring, I think as we work with the advisory committee on our progress on the strategic plan goals, that'll be a big part of it. When we start looking at our data dashboard measures, what we see as attendance and progress on their academic goals, behavior, some of the other areas we have on credit completion, all of those, again, are things we have, but that we have to begin making more sense of. Through our conferences and grading efforts, even this year, we've done a lot more to articulate for parents and caregivers how we're doing grades, and then also to develop grading guidance for all of our programs so that there's more consistency across the board. The family engagement opportunities have provided a good foundation then for how we move it forward, the curriculum review process that's in place. And then next year is part of the strategic plan goal for culturally relevant instruction. That instructional framework is going to be a part of how we, again, talk to all of the audiences that are involved in this. And always a good picture can help see all of the pieces and where they support it, with student learning engagement right in the middle, built on that foundation of what we have for special education and student supports, curriculum and instruction, and the broader community and culture. Alongside of what the students are doing, the staff support them and are continuing to learn themselves. And then we have caregiver involvement as we continue to communicate and build those relationships. All that pulled together and protected from above by our systems, our assessment and data, our school improvement plans, and at the highest level, our state requirements and strategic plan. Again, making sense of all of this is a really big part of the goal and the purpose of the committee. A couple of examples just to show where some of the big pieces then play out for the key audiences. When it comes to the goal setting, the staff are largely responsible for identifying those goals, helping students set them, monitoring their progress, and communicating with caregivers on how that's going. The caregivers review that progress within our conferences, and then they can discuss supports for how they can help with their students. And the students bring their aspirations and their engagement and provide feedback on how that's working. Similarly, with the curriculum review process, as it's developed now, the staff will have a role in implementation, providing feedback on the things that are working or not, and how they're evaluating what happens with student learning in response. The caregivers are understanding and learning more about how that curriculum works and would be providing more feedback on the resources and the impact that it's having on their students and the community at large. Our students always providing feedback through their engagement and helping us learn more about the impact that it's having on them and their learning. And as we move through those cycles, we'll involve more participation at each of those levels. So then as we look forward to next year, the outreach will be a big part of that we provide more opportunities for all those groups to understand the systems and the connections between them. As we have transitions in leadership, the new leaders and roles will be worked out a little better, a little more, and handing off some of those processes as part of the next few weeks of work. And then setting goals for next year around our implementation of MTSS, the instructional framework for culturally relevant instruction, and the other parts of the strategic plan will also be both the context and the content of how we involve our broader community. That's where we landed this year.
Questions? I like the graphic. The house, it really, I mean, it really.
Yeah.
We talked about strategic plan, we've had, you know, what various things, and now sort of seeing it all put together, it really should show that the alignment that we're seeking and building on.
Slide after slide of bulleted lists gets a little.
Yes.
Bringing that slide back up.
Sure.
Are you gonna say something? My question, just because I don't remember. What were the state requirements for executing this? And what's the purpose or intent over that? I'm a little
Yeah.
unconnected to where the genesis of that stuff.
From the very beginning, I think back in slide one, is to involve the community. That's really the part of it. And when we first started looking at it, we were looking at all of the pieces and thinking, well, how are we going to get this together? We know this is there, this is here, we're working on it. And then when we started to talk about it in terms of, well, okay, we want to involve more of our staff and our community in it, we realized, well, how do you put all of that in front of someone and not make it overwhelming or esoteric? And that was actually some of the staff response was, if we're going to bring more people in, we got to explain this a little better than you just did. And not quite that directly, but that was what I heard was, if we're going to, the more we roll out, the more we have to make it meaningful, digestible, and connected to what is important. And so there's a lot there that we're still getting all of our systems connected in or for and with. And yet how we talk about it in a broader sense with more people is what this committee is intended to do. At least
Right.
that's what we were taking away from.
That's the big
it.
question for me.
I could add to that.
Yep.
In April, the board approved the policy 603 for in development, and that by law requires that there's community and caregiver engagement.
Right.
So developing this process, like what will that look like here, and who is that committee? And then we also are identified with ESSER for improvement. And so that also requires involvement. So I'm trying to bring those together, plus the strategic plan where we have family engagement. So we don't want to like connect with our family on 3 separate things. Like we're trying to bring it together in that little house. So when families are in, we are able to talk about curriculum development, ties to our district improvement, to the ESSER and our strategic and there's individual student goals.
If I may, is it meant for the community involvement? The purpose of that is to make sure they're better informed about stuff, or actually seeking their input to take directions on things? And if so, what does that imply in terms of what teaching and learning is doing in terms of the curriculum development? That's what I'm
Yeah.
I recognize that when I sit on the teaching and learning committee in Edina, I mean, I know enough to be dangerous, but like, oh my God, there's just so much stuff. And you're talking about bringing in community people who are not engaged with that component. That's what I'm saying. I love all of this. Don't get me wrong, this is not negative at all.
No,
I'm just worried about what success looks like in terms of you're asking people who are not fully engaged in this very complex thing. What really are we hoping to gain? Not 287, but I'm thinking more broadly the state by requiring this. What is the outcome that is really trying to be generated here, other than more awareness of something? That's what I'm sure. No one has to answer this question for me tonight. It could be my problem. This is my discernment of trying to like, okay, I understand the general idea of where this is going, but in practice of getting to what end for all the effort that's being put into this, that's what I'm trying to understand.
I think, it's important that caregivers and families have input, they understand the curriculum, have input, we orchestrate, and just like you are on that committee, it's critical. I think one thing we didn't have one, so it's important that we got in compliance, but beyond compliance, our belief is that we lift up the voices. So some of our families have felt marginalized and not involved in their home district. And so we want to rebuild that trust and engagement that they do have an opinion and a voice and are interested in learning about what their students are learning. So
Thank you. That helps a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
That is, thank you.
Yeah, and I think just to build on that, I think pretty much all of us in this room have been through election cycles where there's been a lot of distrust in the community as far as what the schools are teaching. So I think the intent of this is to bring an air of transparency to the school districts. That transparency to the public.
Thank you.
I'll ask because it was in the news today, the new social studies standards rolling out, and there's going to be, some to digest there, and it can even be just a more broad question as we differentiate from subject area to subject area, kind of how you plan to tend to each of those, needs for input. It could be social studies, it could be math, it could be just.
I think starting out what I mentioned as far as now that we have some of the structure in place for student advisory and parent advisory, that's the groups that we now have relationships built with and a level of interest and engagement. And so now we can begin to talk about, okay, here's what we're doing with social studies, and here's where some of the intention is, or what some disagreements are. Here's how we're approaching it. These are the standards that we've built our curriculum around. These are the access points that we're beginning to and are providing for all of the different student program needs. And then as we, again, kind of awareness first, so that there can be meaningful engagement in small enough doses that it can make a difference to then how we go back and look at how we're either designing the curriculum or delivering it through the classroom instruction, or even assessing progress on it, so that all students feel like they have access to what is expected, an opportunity to demonstrate their learning in the ways that work best for them. So hopefully that applies to every subject area. And I think we've been doing that over the years with the groups that meet to plan that out and take what's available for curriculum and determine how they're going to adapt it and differentiate and scaffold and extend standards and provide alternative assessments. But talking about that more with larger groups is something that I think will benefit all of us.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Box.
Thank you.
Okay, next item for our business relations report is the 2026-27 annual budget report, and we have Gloria Wilder. Hi, Gloria, our interim director of finance, who's going to present an overview of the 26-27 original budget, and this will be an action item. The board will be asked to approve this budget. Hey, it's good to see you, Gloria.
Hi, thank you. Good to see everyone, although I can barely make you out on my screen, but thank you, Chair Casey and School Board and Superintendent Dow for having me here tonight and allowing me to present the annual budget remotely here. I'll share my screen. Let's see, so that you can see what I'm talking about at the same time here. Like I said, I'll be presenting the original budget for FY 26-27 fiscal year. Some of the items we're going to go over tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about our strategic priorities-based budgeting, some of the budget assumptions and highlights in the budget, and then we'll kind of go over the budget report and numbers and go over a few graphs in comparison to prior year. So our budget process begins with us, the executive leadership and school leaders looking at our strategic plan and our strategic priorities and prioritizing those expenditures that are in those three main themes in our strategic plan: the academic success, cultivating equity and inclusion, and promoting SEL, social emotional learning. Some of our budget highlights that we'll talk a little bit about tonight. There was administrative reorganization that resulted in some reductions. We did eliminate, as you're aware, the ANICA ALC program at North. Strategic priorities, again, we made those funding priorities to continue goals and to implement 26-27 goals. We continued the Grow Your Own mentoring program. We included in this budget some security enhancements that will be funded out of Safe Schools. And then just to highlight, there's been some formula changes in the compensatory education funding, and this did result as an increase in funding for 26-27 for intermediate 287. So some of the assumptions that we used with the revenue is the increase in general education formula. I guess that's not really an assumption, that is the increase in the general education formula is 2.69% for 26-27. And then our revenues, a good share of our revenues are based on projected ADMs. And we go through a planning process with our member districts for those projections. And then some programs are based on historical trends. Just wanted to highlight the special education enrollment is projected to increase in this budget at 7.5% over the ADMs for this past school year for FY26. But this is a little bit of a decrease in our projected planning numbers from the prior year. This budget for revenue will include our state revenues, our direct billed tuition, and our member district levies. And I'll have a chart later in the chart section that kind of shows the breakout of those revenues. And then with the original budget, we will include any known or verified state and federal grants. So we don't put the grant in the budget unless we have the official notification or the OGAN before we put it in the budget. If any are missed in the original budget, then they will be picked up in the revised budget. So with the expenditure assumptions, again, we'll align those expenditures with our strategic priorities. We will align expenditures to promote and recruit high quality and culturally competent staff. With the staff costs, we'll include benefits and estimated increases on those benefits. We'll include contracts that are settled, employee contracts that are settled. And then if contracts are unsettled, then we build in an estimated increase based on historical trends. The tiers budgeting ratio system is used again in this original budget, and that, as a reminder, was developed a few years back with in collaboration with member districts and the CDAC group. So now I'm going to start going over some of the budget numbers. I believe in your board packet you should have the full worksheet if you want to reference the numbers. But in this presentation, I'm just breaking that sheet in two, so it's a little easier to manage on the slides here. But the blue column is our projected fund balance, and that is the projected fund balance we used that was brought to the board with the FY 25-26 revised budget, because the fiscal year is not ended yet, and a lot of the year-end entries are booked through, as you know, in your district, July, August, September. We're busy calculating that year-end, so we use the projected beginning fund balance. And then we have our projected revenues and expenditures. Next column over is our projected fund balance. And then we have any requested transfers and then the adjusted fund balance. So I'll start at the top of the worksheet where we have the general fund unassigned. And in this district, we break our general fund, our unassigned area, up into 4 main content areas. The first one, district-wide admin and operations, and then ALC, academic education, career and technical education programs, and then special ed programs. And then under each of those areas, we do break out the grants separately, just because those can vary quite a bit from year to year. So the first area, admin and operations, is presenting almost a balanced budget there. We are dipping into fund balance by about $79,000. The expenditures show a very minimal increase from revised budget. This is the area that was probably impacted the most with the kind of restructuring of the administrative team. So we did offset some of our contract increases and inflation with those reductions. The ALC and academic area, you can see that we're presenting a balanced budget, equal revenues and expenditures. And this was made possible, of course, because we eliminated the NICA program. And then we are projecting steady growth in the Northern Star online program that made this fund help balance as well. The next area is career and technical education, and that is our Pathways programs at HTC. And it is dipping, we're projecting a pretty balanced budget with revenues and expenditures, dipping into fund balance a little bit. This is one area where our expenditures grew a little more over revised budget because of planned expanded programming over there. They're adding a cosmetology program and I think a Medtronics programming, which I don't know what that means exactly, but I'm sure some of the other leaders do. And then the special ed program, we are projecting a little growth in fund balance there. We are requesting, you can see a $500,000 transfer from there into below area, assigned area, to the strategic priorities, and that we usually do a transfer each year. to keep those strategic priorities moving forward. You can see that brings our total unassigned area up to fund balance of 10,568,982. And I'll go over the percentages on a later slide of what that means as far as percentage of fund balance. The next area is the general fund assigned. And this is the area that the district chooses to assign a separate fund balance so that we can track those expenditures separately from the unassigned area. Just to highlight a couple of those, we have the severance, separation and severance area, and this is used to pay severance upon retirement for those areas that we can't generate aid for. And then we have the vaping settlements, and that will be used for vaping and tobacco prevention programs for our students, I believe. And then we talked a little bit about strategic priorities already, but you can see the 500,000 going into that area. And then we have the tuition adjustment reserve. So this is a reserve that we use in the unexpected change, if there's unexpected changes, a drop in enrollment or MDE tuition system change or change in our tuition-based programs. So then moving forward to the general fund restricted area. This area is restricted, of course, by state statute and requires us to hold a separate fund balance and use those expenditures for the purposes intended in statute. The first area is our long-term facilities maintenance area. And you can see there that we have a larger projected growth in the fund balance. And that's intentional. Those funds are going to be held for larger projects in subsequent years. You can't, so you can do a roof or a parking lot that needs done with those larger project amounts. We have the medical assistance, which is projecting, we're projecting at this point that we'll dip into fund balance, but those revenues can vary quite a bit. So it may end up just balancing out, but we do have a healthy fund balance and medical assistance. Safe schools, we're projecting to dip into fund balance a little bit. It's mainly a balanced budget, and that's the area that we're planning for those security enhancements. American Indian Education Aid is projected to continue for next year. And then we have the compensatory that I mentioned in the budget highlights. The revenue did increase over revised by about 500,000. And we are projecting to put some of that into fund balance. You can see our starting fund balance was getting fairly low, so intentionally building that up a little bit. Then I want to move to the non-major funds. The first area is food service. You can see revenues and expenditures balance at that $1,074,781. This is a fund that's not allowed to go in the negative, and we do a transfer, although you don't see it in the transfer column. The transfer comes from, we'll expend it in this general unassigned district-wide admin and operations area as an expense, and then it goes into revenue in the food service area. So that transfer for FY27 is projected at $524,504. We have the debt service fund. You can see that the fund balance is projected to increase, and that's a planned increase. Those funds go into escrow for the North Education Center debt that will become payable in 2029. We have a small custodial fund that is mainly scholarships in that fund. Construction fund, those we were spending down the proceeds from the construction bond, the 2022A. We are expecting to finish those projects in 26-27. And then we have our two internal service funds, dental and health. We're projecting a small decrease in fund balance in dental, health, a growth in fund balance. This is mainly based on historical trends. This time, a point in the year, it's hard to predict because our claims, of course, will drive those expenditures. So mid-year, we'll take a good look at the trend of those expenditures and revise it if needed. Okay, so total on the general fund. Our general fund total is $125,349,593. This represents 10.92% of over our 25-26 revised budget revenues. And then our expenditures are projected at $124,315,155, and that represents the 10.11% increase. So you may be asking yourself, what is driving those increases? Of course, with any district, the main increase in your expenditures is contract settlements. About 80% of our expenditures are staffing, so that drives a big increase. But additionally, we are projecting growth in Northern Special Ed, Northern Star Online, and then that enhanced programming at career and technical programs. And then just as a reminder, in this original budget, at least the way I used to always do the budget when I was at the district, is we budget the original budget based on that staffing ratio. So we build in the full all open positions to bring our staffing up to that full ADM projected ADM ratio. At revised budget, we do it a little bit different. We'll look at ADM trends, and we'll look at open positions, because unfortunately, still the market, we have a number of open positions mid-year. And then we'll kind of look what we'll realistically fill and put that into the budget, because we're trying to make that budget more to what we think actual end up. And we'll use that preliminary, our ADM data to adjust any of the staff planning if necessary. So our unassigned area, that was the top part of our general fund worksheet. That percentage of fund balance is projected at 8.5%, which is in compliance with the board parameters of a minimum of 8%. This is down a little bit from revised. We projected at 8.64% at revised. And then last year, fiscal year FY 24-25, we ended at 9.59%. So even though the dollar of fund balance is going up a little bit, the overall percentage of the general fund is going down slightly. So the total on all funds, including non-major funds, is the 1,050,705,100,014 on revenues, which is 8.7% over revised budget. And then the expenditures, 1,047,657,081, which represents an increase of 7.56% over the revised budget for 25-26. So I just wanted to highlight the transfers again. We had the transfer coming from special education to strategic priorities, so we can continue those priorities set within the strategic plan. And then again, we had the food service transfer that was reflected in expenditures and revenues. And that was 524,504. This represents an increase of about 75,331 over what was projected in the revised budget. And the main reasons we're seeing a little bit of increase in this original budget is your normal contract settlements, and then we did add 0.5 FTE increase in staffing in the food service program. And then just a reminder, our schools ADM wise are smaller, so we kind of lack that economies of scale to balance a food service program. So it is likely that we will probably always need that offset to help food service. In summary, some of the things we highlighted in the budget: district-wide admin and operations, a small reduction in fund balance, and that administrative reorganization helped offset increases in employee contract agreements. ALC in the academic area projecting balanced budget due to the elimination of the NECA program and projected growth in Northern Star Online. The increase in expenditures over prior year for career and tech pathways programs is due to that expanding that programming. And some of those, especially the startup cost for those programs. And then special ed is projected growth over a prior year or the 25-26 school year enrollment. The tuition adjustment reserve will be used to offset any potential losses in revenue in the MDE tuition or other tuition-based programs. And for those of you that weren't around during the pandemic at 287, we did dip into this fund quite a bit because we had all of a sudden a drop in enrollment that we weren't anticipated. So it is a good reserve to have. And then we have the debt service fund that will continue to grow. And add to the sinking fund to pay off the North Education school quality construction federal borrowing that will become due in 2029. And then lastly, I just wanted to finish the presentation with just a few graphs and charts that will give some comparison to prior year as well. The first one I actually stole from our audit report. This is from FY 24-25 audit report. And this, because that's our last final completed year audit. This is the unrestricted operating fund balance. So this differs from the unassigned as far as this is general fund, just excluding restricted areas. But what I think is important in this graph to note is one, you have intermediate in the lime green, and then you have blue is the statewide. So the last 5 years, I'm sure 25 will be the same. We've stayed below the state average, but also we've stayed very consistent in our fund balance, which is a good thing to have. I wanted to show how our revenues are laid out at 287. A good portion, this big piece of the pie in aqua, is our state resources. So we get special ed aid, Northern Star Online, some state grants. That's that big portion. We have this next piece, biggest piece of our revenue stream is our invoice services. And this is probably different than the revenue stream for your district. There is several funding sources that as intermediate, we can't get the funding sent to us directly. So then we invoice for some of those programs, tuition-based programs. And then the next section is the levies. These are levies that you, as member districts, you levy on our behalf. And then we invoice to receive that revenue from you. And then we have the small sliver of in the line that's miscellaneous and other local. That is more probably, there is some fees in there, like with West Suburban Summer School and stuff, but it's a lot of grants, miscellaneous type grants in that bucket as well. The federal sources, of course, there is some federal grants, and then there is medical assistance falls in that bucket, as well as some of our food service program is funded from federal sources. And then putting the expenditures in a pie chart, you'll notice these numbers look a little different from the how we have it broke out in the worksheet. Like the special ed area here, the reason it is different, it includes all areas of the general fund, so including your restricted, your assigned areas, as well as unassigned. And this graph in whole includes other funds, but it excludes the custodial, construction, and the internal service funds. The next biggest piece of our expenditures is our ALC and academic area. The rest is our career tech pathways programs. And then our district-wide expenditures, we kind of break into 3 main areas. We have the instructional support. So we have like Safe Schools and other supporting instructional areas in that bucket. We have the district-wide admin and services. And then we have the district facilities and maintenance of those facilities in the red bucket. And then we have our debt service, which equals 4.6% of the budget. And then this slim gold piece is our food service program. So just doing a little comparison with prior years, this is expenditures, and we have the total general fund and the total of all funds. And we just put this graph is represented in the thousands. So you'd want to add 3 digits, 3 zeros at the end of each number, but for it to display, we put it in thousands. Does not include our construction fund in the total funds, but you can see we have kind of a steady increase for each year, and that would be expected with normal contract settlements and inflation. But also, if you remember back, this graph starts in FY23. We were just starting to climb out of the pandemic. So each year we have seen an increase in most of our programs, ADMs, with special ed and Northern Star. And so a lot of those programs that dropped during the pandemic have built back up. And so you see that steady trend up in expenditures as well. And then looking at revenues, you would expect that to follow the same trend if we plan our budget out properly, and we do. So you see a steady increase of the revenue as well. So that was my last graph. I just wanted to give a big thank you. It's definitely a collaborative process at 287 to develop our budget. Thank you for Superintendent Dow, who leads the charge, and our principals and administrative assistants who help us project enrollment, work on their staffing, planning their staffing, the district-wide and operational leaders who help prioritize some of those strategic priority budgets and lead in their areas as well. And then the finance team for crunching all the numbers and putting everything together, and HR team that is busy working on the staffing behind the scenes as well. And then I guess a shout out to communications as well, who's Rachel in communications, who spruced up my presentation for me. So it takes a village, and I appreciate everyone's help with the budget. With that, I'd like to open it up if there's any questions.
Gloria, I just want to thank you. We owe you a big debt of gratitude for coming out of retirement and helping us out yet again. We really a huge thank you back to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Madam Chair, can I add?
Superintendent.
Thank you. Gloria has been phenomenal. Thank you for coming out of retirement. Tonight, you guys approved the appointment of a new director of finance. So we filled that position. Her name is Kirsten Quigley, as you saw on the documents. And Gloria has agreed to do some mentoring as she onboards in August. And so Gloria has always been our steady, and as you know, she knows our budget extremely well. And even though she was out of retirement for a year plus, she just picked up where she left off. So thank you, Gloria, for your time and energy in supporting us in the transition.
You're
That's
welcome.
good news. Okay, board members, comments or questions? Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about the unassigned fund balance. I guess I know it's not at our minimum, but I feel like it's getting awfully close. And as a board member, I'm wondering maybe just some explanation as to what strategic priorities the 500,000 is going toward. How much of an impact did that transfer have on our unassigned fund balance? And then, yeah, just wondering if we could have a discussion about where you feel comfortable that hitting.
Sure, certainly. And the 8.5%, is projected at this point. We did end up higher last year, but that was a little bit of an anomaly. We've been kind of hovering around that 8.5% the prior years. So the 500,000, I'd have to do some quick math that we moved to the, let's see,
So while you're doing your quick math, Gloria, this is Marcy, I'll just add that in the revised budget, we were almost at 10%. So we do conservative budgeting at the beginning of the year, and that, as Gloria shared, is as if we have all of our staff hired on day one, which we don't. So we usually do have a fluctuation of our fund balance, and then this year, this fiscal year we're closing, we chose to bring it back under the 10, and put $1 million to offset tuition bills. And then we did really well in MA, and we also used $1 million to offset tuition bills. So we hover around this, and then we usually revise, we're up higher. I would say that's the pattern I've seen since I've been here. And it's mostly conservative budgeting, and the 8.5 feels comfortable in my lens as a superintendent.
And yeah, and that was also part of my wondering is this normal for 287? Because this would not be considered normal at my home district. Like, this would be cause for alarm. So just wondering if that's kind of general operating.
That's, I mean, Gloria has the history of it, but from our fund balance, we like to keep a little bit lower. If we ever are an issue, if there's ever an issue, we bill you more. So for us to have a high fund balance could be concerning to business managers of a member district, saying, you know, that you're growing your fund balance while we're cutting over here. And so we do try and keep it a little bit lower, unlike a traditional district, because we are managing enough fund balance to support and not have your bills go like this each year. But we also don't have a meaty fund balance that a traditional district might see. And that's a little bit the uniqueness between us. It's a good question.
Thanks.
May I make a suggestion on that real quick?
Did Gloria have some?
To add.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
just gonna say the strategic priorities transfer, the 500,000, if I took that out, it's 8.9% versus the 8.5%.
And do we have a sense of what that's for?
Yeah, so it is absolutely for the goals of strategic plan. So investing in our progress monitoring, relevant curriculum, be part of our equity events, family events. So it's all tied directly to the strategic plan. So we do that first. And about 500 is pretty typical that we do this transfer every year. And we go, what do we need to continue goals of the past and what are new expenses? And then if there's funding after that, that's, we talk about investing. So we invested in less PA system, security things.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Gloria.
You're welcome. I was going to also add, even though the percentage is a little bit less than prior year, and it is, the dollar amount is going up, almost 900,000 for the fund balance. And then we do have, like I had mentioned, that tuition reserve in the assigned area that, will help protect the district in case of something unforeseen happening as well.
I was only going to suggest that maybe a slide that actually shows that historical trend of
Okay.
8.5 and for the use and how you've done that would be helpful. And then that explanation that you gave, Superintendent Dowd, especially if you have new members of the school board who are here who won't know that, that actually would go a long way. I think when we get this sort of annual report as a reference piece, that could be very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
What did your conversation with member districts look like?
So Gloria doesn't do, I'll answer that, Gloria, if that's okay. Gloria doesn't do the conversations with the member districts. And so our directors of special education meet with your director, my director, meet and they talk about projections for the students that you currently have who might be on a referral list or a wait list. And then, or you're projecting for next year what are your trend data? So it's actually the directors of special education that do the projections of the ADMs. And then I share this information, revised budget with the superintendents, and then usually it's reviewed to it at the business manager meetings with the member districts.
And how in general did those conversations go?
Yeah, they're always super collaborative.
Okay.
So, you know, some of the reductions, even though there was an increase in special ed, you saw there's a slight decrease. It's really that high school. So we really have sitting with the directors of special education, looking at their trend data and saying, you know what, we used to get a lot more middle school, high school. Now we're getting more elementary, middle school. And so shifting those projections that, you know, maybe we shouldn't use those projections, we might need to adjust them. And so we're entering into that right now, or we did this year, which was where you see the shift. Not just looking at what you think, but what are you noticing? Are you on projections? Or are you off? You historically are off by, you know, if you're off by 10 students, that could be 2 classrooms for us. So off by 10 students is a lot. I mean, that's 2 more teachers, paraprofessionals. And so we also wanted to enter into conversations about 10 in a traditional district would not feel like a lot. It's open their classrooms here. And so continuing to have open conversations with the directors of special ed. Melissa Brading, our current director of special ed, has a great relationship with another district, so it's a very.
Thank you.
The principals are involved too, but. Right.
Other,
I have one.
yeah,
I have one question. I just something I haven't seen before. What is a custodial scholarship?
I was wondering if someone. So our scholarship is something that we support our students. This is before me. That they do work. We hire students, train them in custodial for transition, and they get paid.
Oh, okay.
So the custodial fund, you might see, I believe it's Fund 25. We have ours crosswalked in your district. Custodial funds are set up in UFARs to put any expenditures that do not benefit the district in. And we happen to have when MDE came up with the UFARs funding the Fund 25, we already had the scholarship fund established and that we assigned separately. So we just kept things where they were and just crosswalked our fund in MDE's reports so that we meet UFARs, but yeah. More detail than you probably wanted.
No, that's great. That's great. Thank you.
okay. Well, this is an action item, so unless I see any other questions, I will entertain a motion to approve the 2026-27 original budget as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Mike and seconded by Kim. Any further discussion? Again, a big thank you to you, Gloria, and to the entire team. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye and the budget is approved. Thank you, thank you. All right, we are up to the board business section of our agenda. And the first item is superintendent evaluation summary. So I'm just going to read from my script here. The 2025-26 superintendent evaluation summary of the Intermediate District 287 School Board. Today is June 25th. Our closed meeting date was June 11th, 2026. And board members in attendance at that closed meeting, Zach, Birdman, Andreessen, Locke, Liss, Long, Casey, Genestra, and Rimcall. Did I miss anyone? Okay. The board met in a closed meeting on June 11th, 2026 to discuss the annual superintendent evaluation. Pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05 Subdivision 3A, a public body may close a meeting to evaluate the performance of an individual who is subject to its authority. The public body shall identify the individual to be evaluated prior to closing a meeting. At its next open meeting, the public body shall summarize its conclusions regarding the evaluation. A meeting must be open at the request of the individual who is the subject of the meeting. Superintendent Dow did not request for the meeting to be open, so the meeting was closed, and this is the next open meeting of the board. The purpose of this report is to summarize the evaluation. Just to note that we did have a couple of board members absent from the meeting, but all board members were given the opportunity to complete the evaluation survey in advance. And this separate summary represents the responses to the survey as well as comments from the closed session. In the quantitative section of the evaluation, board members rated Superintendent Dowd in 3 areas, including administrative and managerial leadership, development, implementation, and outcomes of the strategic plan, and accomplishment of superintendent goals. In all 3 areas, all of the ratings the superintendent received were very satisfactory or outstanding. No board member rated the superintendent as satisfactory, unsatisfactory, or poor in any area. Board was also asked to provide comments on Superintendent Dowd's strengths and areas to prioritize in the 2026-27 school year. They cited communication, accountability, compassion, and leadership among Superintendent Dowd's strengths. Several board members mentioned her passion, knowledge, and advocacy for special education within the district and at the Capitol. The board encourages Superintendent Dowd to push on with the current path of prioritizing academic achievement by focusing on the goals of the strategic plan and ensuring implementation and accountability throughout the district. Overall, board members expressed enthusiastic support and gratitude for Superintendent Dowd's work. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that is just, we just read it. We don't have to take any action on that. Also in my chair report, I just want to acknowledge, Dr. Lodge Rogers and Dr. Voss. This is their last meeting. They color coordinated. I don't know if that was intentional. But it has been, just a joy to work with both of you, have you both in the room for all these years. And we're gonna miss you, and we appreciate all of your service. And I think having seen you both work for a long time, I don't think that your service to your community is over at retirement. And so we wish you all the best. We hope you take a little time to rest, but I know you'll be around. So thank you. Can we just do a little round of applause? All right, the AMSD Connections newsletter is attached to the board book, as are the calendars for the 26th and 27 school year, and the tentative 26-27 Get on the Bus and Local 2209 school board meeting schedule is also in the packet. And remember that our next meeting, we don't meet in July, and we don't meet again until Thursday, August 27th. So there is a lot of summer to be had between now and then, which is super exciting. I don't think I have any more announcements, so we can do once around the table. Does anyone have anything to share? The light out, so everyone wants to get back out. I hope you all have a wonderful summer and get some reading done if that's your thing, or travel if that's your thing, or both. And we'll see you again at the end of August. All right. I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Dan, second by Shannon. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The chair votes aye, and we are adjourned at 7:44.